Hello, I'm here with Caitlin, and we have some stories, including the all-important one that games are bad for you. But first, I've got another AI failure. The BBC has an article about an astronomer who was locked out of Twitter for posting sexually explicit content, which consisted of videos of falling meteors, real astronomical falling meteors, which somehow triggered some AI to think that that was pornographic. And apparently this is fairly common that it happens. And as I've said, it happened to us periodically on this podcast that a serious discussion of a research article about COVID is flagged as disinformation. So anyway, it's another demonstration of the failure of the current AI-based content moderation systems. But there is something you might call hope, as those of us that used to use Twitter have observed it totally being destroyed by Musk at incredible speed. Now everyone that works at Twitter is locked out because he's afraid of sabotage, apparently. And the people say the staff has fallen to something like 10% of what it used to be, so there's nobody to run anything. And yet, even in that chaotic situation, after publishing this article, that astronomer's Twitter account was mysteriously reactivated. So he says, even though there is no communication team anymore at Twitter, so you can't ask them a question as a journalist, and they doubt there's anybody actually in charge of moderation, apparently somehow somebody does something for special cases inside Twitter. So I think there are some people still doing their job, even though there is no functional chain of command above them. And, that's the way I've been living for 20 years at my college. There's no functional chain of command at my college. There never has been. And you just have a bunch of independent actors that do things. But anyway, it is, people are using this AI, even though it doesn't work very well. And Caitlin has the all-important story about how games are bad for you.
Well, yeah. So yes, they can be very bad for you, especially if you get stabbed. So Tom's Hardware has a story by Andrew E. Friedman talking about a Razer blade, not a Razer blade laptop, not a Razer laptop, but a Razer type blade stored inside an MSI laptop. So what happened is this guy tried to get through the TSA, and he wanted to, I guess, take a knife with him and needed to get it through the TSA agents. So he had the brilliant idea of storing it inside the laptop. A plastic laptop case, mind you, that can easily be x-rayed. So the TSA agents immediately saw this item that looked like a knife. They saw it on the x-ray first. They weren't sure where it was, so they opened up the bag. They didn't see it. Finally, they opened up the laptop, and there it was. It was just sort of taped to the back of the inside the laptop case, sort of above the battery. What could possibly go wrong by putting a knife above a lithium-ion battery inside a laptop? I don't think anything could possibly go wrong with that. But anyway, the TSA found it. It was a good try. I mean, I'm always tempted every time I go through the TSA to figure out what could I possibly sneak past them. But then my good senses come back to me, and I'm like, this is not a good idea.
So signs in the airport saying the TSA has no sense of humor. Do not make any jokes.
Yes. The TSA does not appreciate, any sort of red teaming activities. So don't. I know it's tempting. I get it. But trust me, it's not worth the hassle if they do find it. So yeah, don't do this. Do not try this. The TSA will find it. Yeah.
And apparently the fine is several $1,000s for trying to sneak something past the TSA, as it should be.
Yeah, it's expensive. I mean, here's a better picture of the knife. So.
Oh yeah. Good.
Yeah, you can see it right there.
He actually lied and said he didn't know about the knife, and then later admitted it was really his knife.
I mean, how could you possibly not know about it? I mean, come on.
Well, I bought the laptop. Gee, it must have been in there all along, and I never knew.
Yeah.
I could do it. Anyway, I mean, I could make that argument, but anyway, not after you admitted it's your knife. All right. Anyway, I was surprised by this one. At Neuroscience News, I had this feeling anecdotally, but they tested it. If you wear a mask, it makes it more difficult to recognize the face of others, even when they are not wearing a mask. And I've noticed the same thing. Wearing a mask makes me feel like I can't see the world as well. And that is apparently a real psychological phenomenon. And they've tried to explain why by sort of making up stuff that isn't terribly convincing, but they've showed it's absolutely true that when people wear a mask, they cannot perceive other people as well. They cannot recognize them as well.
The love box is weird. You don't have a...
I hear a funny noise.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
That's all right. Anyway, so anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. Looks like it's from a reputable university and it matches my own anecdotal experience. It is a psychological situation. They say you feel like you're hidden, like you're observing the world from a place of hiding and you don't interact with people the same way. Well, anyway, I think it's all true. I've certainly noticed since the pandemic hit, and I hardly ever meet students face to face, I really have no idea who they are or anything about them. So I think it's true that these virtual communications are not as good as face to face at making relationships. Anyway, and then let's hear about your glove box, Caitlin.
Right. So I've noticed this trend recently in tech where they add features to make it seem more premium when it actually isn't. And in fact, it actually takes away some value from the product. So for example, I have a air purifier in my room. And in order to make it feel more premium, all this device is, it's some fans, a filter, and I think an air ionizer. That's it. So this is not a fancy high-tech device, but to make it seem high-tech and fancy, they added touch controls to the top. Not a touch screen, just like a capacitive sensor to the buttons, which of course means if you are blind, you can't use this device because there's no tactile feedback. So it, and there are ways to make premium buttons. Case in point, I'm actually going to show off my little keyboard here. This keyboard, for example, okay, it's in frame. This keyboard has very premium buttons. It's all Cherry MX Brown switches and stuff like that. I mean, you can have physical switches that are premium and fancy, but that's not what's in vogue. And so the ultimate case of this, trying to be premium and taking away value has come across in a car, quote unquote, feature. So there's an article in the AutoPN website, autopn.com, by Jason Twarczynski, where if you want to open the glove box in this car, you have to go into the dashboard menu, go to the glove box menu, and then push the glove box release button within that menu. And everyone is saying, no, this is bad. So there's one video here, and this is what you heard in the background while I was. So they go into the menu, they go to the glove box thing, and that's how you open the glove box. You don't just open the glove box like usual. You have to go through this menu. Someone on Twitter posted this.
Into the glove box is weird. You don't have a traditional latch. Instead, you go into the touch screen, the controls menu, and there's a little icon for glove box release. You push that, and then it pops up automatically. No! No! Please, no! No! No!
So this is a big problem in modern design, where manufacturers will, like I said, throw in premium feeling, designs, but actually take away functionality. So we need to address this, and I want to just draw some attention to that.
Yeah, well, perception is reality. This is an issue. You probably make more money by selling it because it seems more science fiction-y.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And so at science.org, there's an article I thought was very interesting, saying that bacteria may be responsible for promoting cancer. They thought that cancer tumors were sterile, but they got samples and examined them, and there was bacteria living in the cells and on the surface of the cancer tumors and among the cells. And that bacteria has two effects. It protects the cancer cells from your white blood cells and from anti-cancer drugs. And it also causes the cancer to spread. And this may be at the heart of metastasizing of cancer. So it seems like a giant leap forward if this continues to hold up. This is an early paper saying that this might be able to prevent cancer from spreading by treating the bacteria inside the cancer tumors, with antibiotics or something. So anyway, it sounds like a important area of research and important early finding. And let's hear about Artemis.
So Artemis launched a few days ago. This was awesome. Artemis 1 is the first launch of the SLS rocket, which is the most powerful rocket ever produced, more powerful than the Saturn V. And it's going, this first test is unmanned. It's just going to the moon and back to test out the systems. But it was a huge success. And this was after many, many delays. So even before getting to launch pad, SLS was planned back in like 2005. Back when they retired the space shuttle, they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll retire the space shuttle and we'll have SLS up and running in no time to replace it. It'll be better. It'll be awesome. So time passed, and then more time passed, and more time passed after that. So finally, here in 2022, they tried getting SLS on the launch pad, and then just bad luck struck a few times, and they couldn't get it to launch. So finally, finally this week they got it launched, and it is awesome. Let me share a video.
Turn off the tires. 7, 6, 5.
Here it goes. And supposedly it's so powerful that it basically turned night into day at the launch site, which is sort of unheard of for rockets. But yeah, there it goes. It has a lot of payload. So like I said, it's unmanned, but it was carrying a bunch of like CubeSats and stuff to the moon, lots of moon-based, projects. So it was a huge success. Nothing really went wrong. There were some issues with an Ethernet switch of all things as they were trying to take off. And by the way, the article I'm pointing to is from The Guardian, and I don't know who is written by, but it's on The Guardian, so you can go to The Guardian and figure it out.
Well, good. That's that launch where they tried many times and had various problems, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I'll take a look at the they have a diagram of the SLS rocket here because it's really interesting. So the top part is, of course, the crew capsule, the main thing that's going to the moon. But at the bottom, you notice that these are RS-25 engines. So these are the same space rocket engines that were used on the space shuttle. And the rocket boosters are basically modified versions of the boosters that were used on the space shuttle. And what's really interesting, I didn't realize this, is that usually they try to recover the rocket boosters after a launch. These are just sort of designed just to be used once and then burn up in the atmosphere. So they're just really one-use things. They're really ridiculous. But this is the most powerful rocket ever built. It is going to the moon. Going to the moon several times, and it's a huge success. And they really wanted to leverage established technology, so they knew it'd be reliable. They didn't want people on the launch pad blowing up, because as you saw in that launch video, it's powerful, and if it blows up on the launch pad with crew inside, that would be very bad. Even though the top thing up there, that little nose thing at the top, that is actually an escape rocket. So if something catastrophic does happen, they can jettison the crew capsule off the main rocket.
So if this test goes okay, then they're going to establish a permanent base on the moon. Is that the idea?
That is the idea. So there's two things going on. First, there's the lunar missions where they want to set up permanent operations on the moon. And including that means sending the first woman and first person of color and both at the same time, and everyone to the moon pretty much. And also there's the Gateway project. Gateway will be the new space station, but it will not be orbiting Earth. It will be orbiting the moon. And so the SLS will be key to getting to Gateway as well.
I wonder about long-term presence on the moon. I know it's going to be pretty bad for your health. Even the space station is pretty bad for your health.
Yeah, it's not going to be good for your health. People who go to the moon are going to be well aware of the health issues. They will go anyway. I mean, it is an important thing to do, and it's just something that okay, like the people that have to clean up toxic waste. Like, yeah, okay, we know it's not good for you, but someone has to do it. And they know the risks. I remember after the Fukushima Daiichi reactor failed, in Japan, a bunch of the older generation came to help with the cleanup efforts because they knew full well that, radiation sickness was a very obvious, side effect. So our future moon missions likely will start off with young people, but if it becomes very mainstream, we might be sending up older people who can sort of deal with the radiation and not worry about premature death from it. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I know there was a time, I think a few years ago, when someone said they wanted to make a launch to Mars and there would be no way back, and there were thousands of people volunteering anyway.
Right.
There's an amazing number of people volunteering to go into certain death. I don't recommend it, but there's people that are willing to do it.
Yeah, what I think people don't realize is that I think they think going to Mars would be similar to living on Earth. And that is the case if you were to live exactly on like the North Pole in an enclosed environment without an atmosphere outside. That's what it's like living on Mars. It's not, it will kill you immediately. You can't go outside. You're stuck inside, and these pods have to be like maintained all the time. You'll be working 24/7 to make sure they don't fail. If something happens, you can't get help or supplies or anything for like a year or sometimes, or 2 years at a time. It is. I think if you were to replace Mars with just, like I said, an outpost in the middle of Antarctica, most people would not want to do it. But that's really what it's like living on Mars.
I think that was an ad for one of the first expeditions up north where it said, we need strong men to work for low pay under hazardous conditions with no likelihood of survival. And they got people to volunteer for it.
Yeah. Going to Mars is not an easy task. And if we are going to go to Mars, and I think there's scientific value in going to Mars personally, we should do some baby steps. And baby step number 1 is learning how to live on the moon. If we can live on the moon, okay, then maybe we can take that knowledge and move it on to Mars, but we got to do one thing at a time.
I'm pretty skeptical about all of it. It seems to me like this is why God made robots. I mean, the environment there is so full of so much radiation you can't reasonably block that it's just never going to be safe enough for humans to reasonably do it. This is why you send robots into dangerous places where it's not fit for humans to go.
I agree. I think that robots are really essential in these missions. I don't disagree. I do think there is value in sending people to the moon to have personal explorers. I mean, if you're doing science, it makes sense to do as much of it, in person. I mean, there is something very boring if you just set up machines to do all your science for you. That I think is makes a compelling argument to have a human element. You want to inspire people and make the world a better place and all that stuff. And
well, there's people that will do it, and I mean, but I recommend being boring and surviving. I'm all for that.
Well, hey, as long as there are people willing to do it and willing to take willing to inspire others, and that's a big job of the astronauts. It's not just to go out and do science, and they do that, but also to inspire others. And there's a whole lot of stuff. Like if you're an astronaut, or even if you just work at NASA in general, they have this huge thing on like social media about what you can and can't say. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a propaganda machine because NASA's not really propaganda machine, but they do want to inspire people to go into STEM fields and stuff like that. And so a lot of the work is in, encouraging that and, getting that human element involved.
Well, I remember this was true of the first rockets. The bloodless scientists said, we're just going to have no humans in there and just robots. And they said, no, we have to have humans in, or nobody will fund the program otherwise. We have to have heroic people for public relations purposes.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I mean, there is benefit, like I said, to having people do this stuff instead of just robots all the time. Obviously, you don't want robots. You don't want people doing all the hard work. Sometimes you do need the robots to go out and clean up, the super hazardous, nuclear waste and stuff like that would kill you instantly. But there is something about the human element that's important.
Yeah, those pesky humans. All right. Well, that's it for this one, and we'll be back on Tuesday.